Hello. All right, I think we're live finally. I wasn't sure if YouTube was going to work tonight. So, hello everyone. Welcome back to Plant-Based Running Tip Tuesdays with myself, Coach Kayla, as well as episode 92 of the Plant-Based Performance podcast. So, I hope everybody is having a great week and a great summer. I can't believe that the summer is almost over. Feels like summer always goes so fast. And I know many of you are probably in summer training or nearing the end of summer training for your fall marathon. So I thought today, even though unfortunately I'm not with you, I'm not training right now for a fall marathon, but this is something that clients have experienced as well as myself. So I wanted to talk about today about weight gain during marathon training. This is also a topic that I have seen come up a lot on social media and a lot of interesting comments and questions and concerns around this topic. So I wanted to talk about this. So why might you get weight gain during marathon training? Because for one, right, we're it's a lot of activity. So if you think of your basic nutrition concept of calories in, calories out, most likely, right, you would be in a calorie deficient. So unless you're really making sure that you're eating more to meet those needs. So it's an interesting concept, right? Why does this happen? Well, one reason could be is ignoring recovery nutrition. Another reason could be because you earned it. Another reason could be that you could be eating too many carbs. Even though we know we want to increase our carbohydrates, we may miscalculate or not quite, really need as many carbs as we think we do for the activity that we've done. We could also get into a cycle of over and under eating, and that can really affect a weight as well. Weight can also be related not necessarily just to calories in, calories out, but also gaining muscle, right? We can gain muscle while we're training for a marathon, or if we're doing strength training, there may be some gaining muscle. There also could be some inflammation or shift in fluid balance, which I'm going to talk more about, as well as storing more glycogen. It could be that it's not just that yes, it could be, okay, you're eating more carbs, but you need to eat more carbs because you need to store more glycogen, which is a good thing. The more glycogen your body has, the better it's going to perform, right? If you've ever experienced bulking or just not being able to get through that long run, that is not having those glycogen stores. And you will feel it. You will absolutely know. If you've experienced this, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. I've experienced this myself at a marathon. It is not pretty. It's not fun, but you want more glycogen stores. So in a sense, there's some times that weight gain is not necessarily always a bad thing. Another thing is lack of sleep and stress. That can also affect our weight. So especially with training for a marathon. So there's all these things that can go into play. And I really want to get across, I guess, the message today of, it's more than just calories in than our calories out, right? Sleep, stress, inflammation, gaining muscle, all of this can be related as well. So I want us to think about that. So let's dive deeper into what do we do? How do we avoid weight gain? Because most of us don't want it, even though necessarily it's not always a bad thing, and it could be temporary, it could change, especially if it's fluid balance. But how do we avoid this? Or how do we also change our mindsets around it? And that's what I also want to kind of touch upon as well, because if anybody's ever had, any past eating disordered habits, that can be really, really challenging. If, you're coming from that place, or you have, had that before, those things, they can creep up, they can come back. And they're never, you may have think, okay, I've done recovery, I'm good, right? But sometimes it can happen. So we'll talk about that as well. So how do we avoid? Number one, I said ignoring recovery nutrition, right? So this means it's so important to eat for recovery. We need to make sure that we eat at least an hour after our activity, after our strength workouts, after our run. We need to make sure that we're eating an hour after, and we need to make sure that we're also choosing the right food. So we want to make sure that we're including, complex carbohydrates as well as protein. We want to make sure we're including both of those. Those can be a little bit harder when you're plant-based or vegan, right? Those are a little less convenient foods. So the best thing to do is either have that protein shake ready, have protein powder on hand, have the ability to make shakes, make your own shake and add protein like beans to, peanut butter, nut butter. Or we need to have foods that are already prepared that we can have to intake right away. Another thing, plant-based milk. That's another option. Plant-based chocolate milk. They make that now. There's one brand that I know of, Ripple, that has pea protein. So that's an option as well. But, another thing to consider, to think about, right, especially with weight gain, or I should explain why this happens, is when we're not eating right after for recovery. Sometimes because maybe the convenience of it's just not convenient. It could be that, we don't have anything prepared that we want to eat that we feel like is good for us, that we should be eating, or not just that, but maybe you might not have an appetite. I know a lot of times after I ran those hot runs in the heat, I would not have an appetite. And that is very common. I hear that a lot from clients, that after they come back from longer runs, they're just not hungry afterwards. So they skip that recovery nutrition right up, because they're just not hungry. But what happens, or what can happen, which can lead to overweight or to gaining weight, is you may later overeat or choose foods that are easiest. So like I said, maybe, you could be choosing not to eat because you just don't have the proper nutrition to have available, or you're eating foods that are not the best, because later your hunger is going to kick in and you're going to crave sweets, right? You're going to crave that sugar and that fat because your body is depleted of everything. It's hungry, it's famished. It's like, get food into me, and you've depleted your glycogen stores. So it's going to want to replace that. So it's going to want that sugar. So if we know that we want to limit that, then we need to make sure we're focused on getting the right proper nutrition right after our run. Another thing that we can do too, number 2, is how to avoid weight gain, is to hydrate and fuel during. That's another thing. So I also mentioned there could be some inflammation or shift in balance, fluid balance. So this is really important as well, that we're making sure we're hydrating and we're fueling properly during that run. So also with hydration, it's not just water. We also need to be taking in electrolytes and possibly even salt tabs, especially if your skin's getting salty. That means that maybe you're not intaking enough salt in your diet. And this is very common for a lot of my whole food plant-based eaters, because you're eating whole foods. You're not eating a lot of salty foods. If you don't like pickles and olives and, these or eat any processed foods or chips and things like that, then most likely you're not getting a lot of salt in your diet. So we need to make sure we're replacing, or make sure, especially during those runs, that we're getting salt in our body and those electrolytes. So that is important. And fueling with glycogen, right? We may have some those fluid shifts or inflammation because we're not properly fueling during either. So that is also important, that every 45 minutes to an hour, we should be replacing our glycogen stores. So that's also very important. Number 3, eating enough to preservation mode, which is also known as starvation mode, and decreasing a decrease in our metabolism. So it's really important that we make sure we're eating enough. For really, I would say, since my clients are very Pacific, you're very a Pacific person or clientele, I can say this, that every single one of them, I recommend 3 meals, 2 snacks. So eating at least 5 times a day, sometimes up to 6 times a day, to make sure we're eating enough. And this is so important. And that doesn't include what you're having during your run. So it can be a lot for people, again, especially if you've had disordered eating habits in the past, or you're concerned about weight gain, or you don't like seeing that scale go up, right? It may trigger you to wanting to restrict, but really that's the opposite of what we should be doing. We really need to be fueling ourselves properly, because we don't want our bodies to go in starvation mode or preservation mode and hold on to more fat and fluid, because it doesn't know when it's going to get fat again. And this has a lot to do with our hormones, especially as women. That's what our bodies do. So I see that a lot, and especially in females and female runners, this happens. And it's not, as I said, it's not a bad thing. It's a part of the process and the journey. But it can, decrease your metabolism. So again, we need to make sure that we are eating enough to keep that metabolism going, to making sure we're fueling properly and all of that. Number 4, choose whole food, nutrient-dense foods most often. So, those are foods we want to choose, obviously, more often, which most of my clients do. Again, make sure you do include some salty foods and take those electrolytes, because those are important too. But in general, those are the foods we want to focus on. We just need to make sure we're eating enough of those foods. And that's where I see people struggle with, eating enough fruits, eating enough vegetables. That's usually where people struggle. We tend to get a lot more of these, I guess in general, not always specifically my clients, but in general, as a population, we're eating more foods that are convenient, that are higher fat, higher sugar. And obviously, even if no matter what activity you're doing, that could still lead to weight gain. And adding strength training is also something that can really help. I know for me personally, it has helped. That strength training has really helped. Is there some evidence? There may be some evidence out there. I don't know how much evidence or research there really is around this. But we do know, that strength training, getting more muscle, that helps our metabolism. So that can be really helpful. For me personally, I just know it's helped with that body composition piece. That has never been my core focus. Obviously, the focus is always running, make sure I'm fueling properly. But when I tend to run a lot and decrease that strength training or do less strength training, my body does change. I tend to hold on to more fluid and more inflammation, and just feels like I feel fluffier. But when I do add in that strength training, it does help. And we do know strength training helps a lot to prevent injuries and many other things as well. Balance and, helping with balance and core, and can really help your performance and your running. So those are just some thoughts that I had around how to avoid weight gain during marathon training. Again, number 1, eating for recovery. Number 2, hydrating and fueling properly during the run, especially long runs. Eating enough to prevent that starvation and preservation mode. And choosing whole food and nutrient foods most often, but yes, still including some salty foods. And number 5, adding in that strength training can also be really helpful to help with that, some of that body composition stuff and feeling stronger, avoiding injuries, increasing that metabolism. All of those things are very good things. So I hope this was helpful. If you guys have any feedback or any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I do take clients in the evenings. So if you would like to get on my schedule, you can. I do have open availability on Mondays, but I usually don't take clients on those days. Those are, really just for like new client calls, things like that. But in the evenings, I do have spots available to squeeze you in if you want to get on my schedule and need more help and guidance with fueling and nutrition, specifically for marathon training or ultra running or triathlons, whatever your endurance sport is as well. So glad to help if you need any assistance or help. I do have a lot of resources. You can join my Facebook group, the Plant-Based Performance Running Group. I also have a website where I have resources as well that you can download. And what else? And this podcast, my YouTube channel, tons of places to find more information if you're interested. And with that, hopefully we will see you guys not next Tuesday. I will see you again August 23rd for our next episode of Tip Tuesdays with Plant-Based Running Tip Tuesdays with Coach Kayla, and episode 92 of the Plant-Based Performance Podcast. Bye.